Welcome to the October 24th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll call the meeting to order and take approval of the agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, second by Rosser. Discussion. Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Director Rosser, would you please read the mission statement?
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow in and shape a changing society.
Thank you. First item tonight is a public forum. We have no one wishing to speak, so we'll move into our first discussion item, 11th grade science courses.
Math and science teacher on special assignment for the district, and just needed to bring to your attention that we will be phasing in the new science courses at the 11th grade level beginning next fall. There was a new 3-path system approved a few years ago, and so last fall we implemented the 9th grade courses. This fall we phased in the sophomore level courses, and then next fall will be the junior level courses, mostly physics and chemistry.
What do you feel? How's it being adopted? Are parents and students happy with the change? It's a few years old now, but.
Yeah, Eileen Sullivan was supposed to be here tonight too, and she would be able to give you a bit better spectrum on that. But overall, pretty positive. I think we're still learning about it and finding best placement for our kids, but finding that it's fitting our needs really well.
I did talk to Eileen a couple weeks ago. She voiced the same thing. So
Yeah.
I think our students are enjoying that new offering.
Excellent.
Is there a plan to monitor how many jump back and forth between the different tracks at all? Or
I do think that
quantified?
information is known. Either Eileen or Spence or Dr. Mike Ames would know that as well.
Yeah, I wasn't guessing
Those specifics.
at this point that it showing any trend, obviously, but it's
Yeah, I
a
think
few
it's
years down
pretty
the road
low,
that-
kids who are moving between the two. I think we're finding the right placement for kids initially, so there hasn't been a lot of movement, but there is obviously the opportunity to do so.
Okay.
Other questions? Discussion? Great. Thanks for the update.
Okay, thank you.
Next item tonight is the PEPL budget overview.
Good evening. I'm going to give you an update on the PEPL budget. Just a little bit of background. Physical plant and equipment levy, PPLEL, not to be confused with Tiny Rocks, is a funding source that we have to be able to maintain the facilities. We can also spend it for technology, site acquisition, new facilities, and equipment. There's two portions of the funding source. One is a $1.34 PEPL levy. That's a voter-approved levy that can last up to 10 years. Currently, our levy expires in September of 2017 for that portion. The other portion of the funding is the 33-cent PEPL levy, and that is approved annually by the school board. The PEPL committee meets 4 times a year, and their role is to provide guidance and direction to prioritize maintenance and capital improvement work. Priority consideration by the committee includes safety, ADA, repair and remodeling, capital improvement projects, energy economy, renewal and replacement, and reserves. The report I handed out, or an updated or revised PEPL report.
Just take that one and then the other one off. Your other one's taped underneath there, so it's set perfect. I hope.
Oh, you got it for me.
There you go.
You the man. This is we've worked to be able to modify this report so it's a little bit more user-friendly. What we do is we recognize that a significant portion of our budget covers annual expenditures. facilities maintenance or routine maintenance that occurs throughout the year, taking care of the buildings and the grounds. We also have technology is a nice portion of it that we can pay for with the PEPAL funds. Transportation includes our busing and rental for the bus building. Broke out vehicles and equipment just because that's kind of a unique group of that we track. And then we also can pay for rent and lease of rooms. So as you can see in this updated budget report, our capital improvement projects at the top consist of 28% of the PEPAL budget this year, and next year it'll be 37%. We're also able to allocate some money to the out of the PEPAL funding for elementary program. The significant difference between the information that was included in the board agenda packet that was handed out last week, and this was, I'd taken some time to reconcile the amount of funding that we had for the PEPAL allocation to the elementary program, and we were able to take that as overly conservative, and so I've reduced that by $1 million. So I still have a little bit of a cushion in this $521,000 that's remaining, but I'm not being overly conservative. And then each year, then I'm wanting to carry a $350,000 contingency. That works into about 6 to 7% of the overall PEPAL funding budget. Our annual expenditures sum up to approximately, they're about 58% of the budget this year and 56% of the budget for next year. But I've got a couple of charts that I've tried to use to help to kind of graphically illustrate that. On the left side, we have the portion of the budget that includes the capital improvements, our allocation to the elementary this year. This will be the last time that we have that, just this one funding year. I have the contingency of $350,000, and then the remaining portion is the annual expenditures. And then I've further broken down in the smaller pie the percentage or the proportion of annual expenditures. In the 17-18 budget year, we have similar type of a breakdown with the fundings, and in the future I think our budget report is going to be more similar to the 17-18 because of the impact that the contribution to the elementary programs makes or is made. When I go through and do my annual update, I start out with the approved budget that Ms. Stensland had presented in the board earlier this year. I go through and update the FY 15-16 expenses, revenue, and then the beginning and ending fund balance, and then put in a projection for the current year, the 16-17 revenues. And then I update the results for revenue and expenses in the 15-16 budget year. This particular budget that we have, that I presented here, includes, we added an account for rental and lease of buildings. Chris Stenson found out or pointed out that the Beloit building for special education was previously paid from the general fund. And so rental and lease of buildings or rooms that are not an emergency are not only allowed to be paid with PEPAL funds. So we're able to make that correction and be able to release a little bit of money from the general fund and be able to expend it out of PEPAL. Also, we have ISU building rental for graduation that I have included in that account. Additional items in the PEPAL budget that's in front of you include an adjustment for payment for the air books. When Carl made the purchase for the air books, we got some revenue from the sale of the old air books, and we had initially applied that to PEPAL, but that needs to get, by code, it needs to be deposited in the general fund. So we've made that adjustment, and I have that accounted for in the budget. That correction has an impact of about $440,000 on the PEPAL budget. So that's reflected in here, and we still have a healthy balance. The next thing then is what we focus on more so on the, or we can or should focus on with the PEPL committee is the projects. And so on the next sheet in the report, lists the projects, and I actually go out to, let's see, I'm getting better technology-wise. 5 years. There we go. Yes. So these are the projects that were discussed and approved to move forward with the PEPL committee. One of the other confusing aspects about budgeting and with the PEPL committee is that a lot of these big projects I can accomplish over the summer, so it actually straddles a fiscal year budget, so that's caused some confusion. So I'm trying to kind of eliminate that without losing track of it. Some of the projects that we have included, the middle school exterior athletic improvements, so we're going to be able to do some things as far as bringing restrooms out there to the middle school athletics facility, do some fencing, put some asphalt on the track to be able to improve that track service. We aren't going to use an all-weather or do an all-weather surface, but we are going to be able to look at doing the track, put some bleachers out there, and then we also have a need for a cover, 4-post roofed shelter, so that we can just be able to block some sun out there, and they'll be able to use that during practice as well as competitions. At Northwood, we have replacing the east parking lot as well as doing some other site improvements out there in the playground area, taking up some maintenance to the hard surface paving. Middle school will replace the lighting in the auditorium. Not only is it the lighting we want to change to LED, but the lighting control system was found to be outdated, so we'll be able to take care of that at the same time. We have money budgeted in here and approved for covering the soffits and fascias out at Sawyer Elementary. So I'll work to be able to get that scheduled bid and completed here as time permits. A couple items that had come up that we need to address and take care of is the district needs a time clock system. And we also are required to upgrade the Durham radios system from analog to digital. Another project that is going to have some significant benefit is to expanding the green space out at Edwards Elementary, south of the playground. There's kind of a narrow strip, and I think we can get that expanded by bringing in some fill and providing an additional green space. I did adjust that budget some to cover or account for sod and some fencing. Thank you. Northwoods, we have some hollow metal door defects that we want to be able to repair. At the high school, we're getting close to being able to be asbestos-free at the high school. So I have that one on, and now I'll have a little bit of room to breathe, so want to be able to take some floor tile out. That is going to be beneficial because it's going to eliminate that aspect in the renovation, or actually the renovation addition, whatever the future decision is on the high school. One thing that I think is going to provide some benefit is connecting the emergency generator to the server room to provide backup power to the server room, a critical component in our district data structure. The carpeting for the classroom is associated with the vinyl asbestos tile removal. When we do carpeting, we'll get an economical type of material. We won't look at getting a real long-lasting, long-term that coincides with the future of the high school. In Mitchell, we have some trough sinks in the art classroom. That was something that was overlooked in the design of the elementary program, and by completing this work, we'll bring Mitchell art room up to the same standards as the other 4 elementaries. Then we have window shades and blinds. That was another thing that we didn't have included with the construction, so I'll be able to pick that up with PEPL funds. Gym floor covers and equipment. Then we're going to look to be able to buy some speech room furniture for our elementary buildings. That didn't get included with the FF&E on our elementary building program. Another project is the new tennis courts up at 24th Street. That's gonna, it's preparing for and some needed space that we will, depending on what the future of the high school is. But we have some space here, and that the space here on this site has been earmarked for the tennis court, so we've got that budget in. Another thing we have is replacing the cooling tower at the middle school. That's an outside piece of equipment that's subject to weather and in the sun, and that's a piece of equipment that we have that I'll need to take care of here too. And then farther down the road, we have replacing the turf at the football field and replacing the track surface up at the high school. So when these new projects are completed, I go into my budget, which is a pretty big spreadsheet, and I have it going out a couple years. I do put in, for instance, a roof replacement in 23 years. So if we, in 23 years, we'll replace the roof, and then another 23 years. So I have it in the schedule, and when my successors have a chance to open up that schedule, then they'll be able to see that we have these things programmed in. So not only roofing, but different aspects of carpeting and so on. I'll go ahead and get those into this budget so that they don't come up as a surprise when they occur, and we'll still be able to maintain our regular maintenance type, annual maintenance, our routine maintenance type of things without being surprised for things that come up, major equipment items. So after that, I submitted or produced the standard detailed reports that I've been submitting here over the last several years, and this is developed over time. So we have the results of our FY 15-16 budget and expenditures, and then following that, then we have the final for FY 16-17 and the initial for 17-18, and then the final sheet on the report is the 5-year PEPL budget. So I actually have 6 years shown. I'm not really counting 15-16 because that's completed, so I do the next 5 years. So that's all I have to say, unless there's any questions.
I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments. So one of the differences between 16-17 and 17-18 is the transportation is down about 80 grand.
Yes, sir.
And I assume that is a function of us having not to pay rent for the facility for storing buses, because we're building one where we can house them.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And secondly, I would just point out that probably this technology item, so from 1 year goes to 1.7 down to just about 1.1. So I think Carl has us on a cadence for 1 lull year and 3 bigger years, something like this. So in this PEPL cycle, we're seeing maybe part of the top side and part of the bottom side, but just sort of preparing us that it doesn't stay at that million, or it doesn't keep going down. It's probably more of a steady state expense as long as we continue to do 1-to-1. Jerry's going to make a liar out of me, but my perspective for being on the PEPL committee for 5 years is we never spend our budget. We always budget more than $4 million in revenue, and we got $4 million in revenue, and we never spend it unless, like this year, we're putting an allocation toward the elementary program. That was sort of an at the end allocation as opposed to a consistent throughout. I would also add, just for new board members in particular, the committee members of the PEPL committee also include some of the admin staff and some citizens as well that are on this. So it's a broad cross-section of thinking around this. And lastly, I would say, not necessarily related to the budget, but related to the PEPL conversation, say we had some discussion around seeking renewal from our community probably next September with the next board election.
I like the report, Jerry. The one thing I want to highlight is I love the idea of the window shades and blinds. That way there's some uniformity. Will those all be the same across every building? Is that your plan?
Yeah, I was able to start with Edwards, Meeker, and Mitchell in the administration area, so I've developed a standard. So I would like to be able to implement that standard throughout the district.
Because I have heard feedback from teachers and with sunlight and stuff can be a challenge.
Yes.
So having that is a great idea.
And what did you say on that, Jerry? Like in the admin areas and then on the southern exposures of the buildings?
Yeah, initially I'd planned on taking a kind of a three-step approach. One is first getting the admin for the privacy concern, and then hit the south elevation, and then the north elevation, or picking up the rest of them.
Okay.
With the funding here that I have in, I've got it all funded here now between this year and straddling the fiscal year. So I'm looking at being able to try and do all of them at once.
And they're very similar to what we have out in the lobby, right?
Yes, yep. So
When
I've-
we approve the Pebble budget that you bring to us, it takes care of a lot of non-controversial stuff like striping the pavement, replacing water faucets. When do you decide to bring these major projects to the board, like the middle school athletics, the tennis court? When do you bring those to the board for discussion?
Well, today, they're for discussion now with this budget, and then the next school board meeting, then I'll ask for approval.
I think Director Talbot's looking for more specifics relative to drawings, specifics more related to each of the projects that are at the middle school, so we can evaluate them.
Yeah, once we're approved, then we'll go ahead and engage the design team to go ahead and continue with the design. And so we'll bring it forward then during the bidding process.
So you're going to ask for approval for design, and then after design, then approval for the project?
Yes, once we get we'll go ahead and we'll have to do the notifications for the bidding procedures. So we'll go through the bidding process. So I'll have approval to be able to advertise and bid the project, and then we'll accept the project and award it.
What I'm concerned about with a project of that magnitude is we've not had any kind of discussion about whether or not the money is better spent elsewhere, nor have we had any discussion about the need for improvement of facilities. So I feel like we're quite a bit ahead of the curve here. Now, I understand Pebble may have done all this, but for the board, the first we heard about any middle school project was just a casual reference at the last facilities meeting. So the 1.7 million, 1.3 million, 1.2 million that you're asking for, the board doesn't have any background on it.
Want to bring that information
Jerry?
to the board at our next meeting? Jerry?
Jerry,
relative to
maybe
this?
I was going to ask a question before Bill, and this probably help you a little bit. Can you describe, Pebble did talk about doing the project in one year, and you've ultimately decided that it's better to be spread over 2 years. Can you describe what parts of the project will be done in the first year, and then what the remaining part, just kind of describe in more detail what projects are going to be done there and which ones are going to be done in the first summer, really, and then which ones you're talking about doing in the second phase.
Well, it's more like it's a continuous project.
Right.
And it just ends up, they start in late May or June, and the work continues through July. So we'll get partially billed for it in June,
Okay.
and then that closes the fiscal year, and then as they continue to work, then July will end up getting paid for in the next year.
So it will be done in
fiscal
one
year.
summer.
Yes.
Okay. And just talk in more detail of what improvements specifically are you're talking about. Because, yeah, the Pebble Committee has been privy to some of the drawings and more detailed discussions, but yes, the full board has not. So if you could just maybe go over some of those details, that'd be great.
I just happen to have that with me.
Yeah, it's either that or just tee it up. I mean, send that report out and tee it up for the next meeting. I agree with Bill that, I mean, I think Pebble's done its work and is bringing this recommendation forward, and that's one big expenditure, not unlike how we labored over some of the football concession stands, not unlike how we labored over some of the scoreboards, not unlike we labored over some of that. So I think, yeah, giving everybody the benefit of what you know. And maybe you can do it now, or maybe we tee it up as a discussion item next time.
See if I can hold it to 2 minutes. What we did is we met with the principal, athletic director, and myself, and Don Marner with Snyder and Associates, and we came up with a list of wants or needs. And specifically, there are somewhat more of some needs out there. The significant importance of being able to do this development is that the middle school football field and that outdoor athletics facility has moved from the backyard, the back corner of the backyard, to the front side yard with the street next to it. So there's improved access. When we did the Dotson Drive connection, that provides a lot more visibility and a lot more access, and it's going to get used more, and it's going to be easier, more convenient. One of the things, important things that we don't have out there, are restroom facilities. So a restroom facility was really important, and that was a high priority. Additionally, like I mentioned kind of lightly a minute ago, was we need to have bleachers out there. I've had that in the budget for several years because the deep bleachers are ready to be replaced. And so rather than just replace in kind, we're looking at being able to get the right thing. And in order to be able to get the right thing out there, we'll have elevated bleachers. The track has been a challenge as far as and a concern with being able to safely run the kids on that. They still compete at the high school, and they'll continue to compete at the high school. But in order to provide a safe running surface, that's where we recommend doing the asphalt surface. The little shelter is about a 20 by 20 roof with 4 legs on it to support it. And that's pretty important too, because in the spring and the fall, there's no cover, there's no shelter from the sun. With the additional exposure, we're going to want to or need to put some fencing up just to manage the access and for that. When we did the high school scoreboard, we did pull the old scoreboard out, and we wanted with the intent of being able to use it out here. So rather than just do a remove and replace, we considered what's the right location for it. And so that's where we've located the scoreboard on the south end zone. We've got some additional pavement needs around the existing storage shed, which not only with the restroom, but we'll have a little bit of a space that we can take this opportunity to provide some concessions area. And we want to be able to give that storage shed a little bit of a facelift so that it's appealing and presents nicely out there. We also have a couple of security lights and then a drinking fountain. The drinking fountain would be over by the shelter. So we work with them to kind of narrow down and be able to focus on the true needs and not get it elaborate or go too far out of the way. Another physical need, I guess, I have is we have a drainage problem. We got a wet spot in the north that wasn't graded right. So while we have the equipment and the utilities or the opportunity there, want to be able to improve that marshland over there and be able to get it to drain. So those are the things that we have included in that $3 million for the middle school project. I do also have the design fees and some FF&E items included. So that's a project budget, not a construction budget. I guess I went over 2 minutes. Sorry.
I think what I propose doing maybe going forward is when we have expenditures over a certain threshold, I'm not sure what that threshold is if we were to bring that before the board early on. I know the PEPL's doing great work in fully vetting this, but having the board review a major project prior to approval would probably be helpful. So
Okay.
I agree with Bill, but 1.2 seems pretty large to just approve tonight. So I don't know if that's something we want to have in policy or it's just
I was just going to
for
ask
the-
if you want us to put that on our list.
I think just something good to think about, whether it's 20% of your annual budget for your expenditures or whatever figure you think is reasonable, but having more, just an understanding of why is PEPL recommending this and what are the benefits, what things are we maybe giving up and deferring, such as Bill's alluding to, just why it makes sense.
Okay.
Any comments on that?
I think I'd feel better about that because the one I was going to ask about was just like replace the track surface at the high school in 2020, and, you know, when will that get reviewed if that's actually necessary at that point? You know, I mean, it isn't necessary today, and so that'll bring that review at that time, you know, closer to that time back up as a question, as a, you know, exactly, do we need to do it now? Do we need to, you know, is it still good enough for 2 more years or 5 more years or whatever? I mean, you can't guess right now as to whether it'll be necessary in 4 years, so.
That's one of the items that we put in there is a long-term, so that
Yeah.
we can see it coming up and we can prepare to it. And then we can
Yeah.
decide as we get closer, well, do we need to pull it up because it's deteriorating faster than we anticipated, or can we stretch out another year or two?
Yeah, no, and I completely appreciate the projecting all this, and that's, you know, having all those projections is great, but I think we do, yeah, I'd be supportive of figuring out some threshold and bringing that forward as if it's above this, like you said, percentage or dollar figure or whatever it is, that we'll have further discussion prior.
I would just add 2 things, because we talk a lot about planning for the future, but as these reports would show, we're not setting money aside for the future. We deal with the future when the future comes. This is as much of a planning thing, like for the high school track, for example. And secondly, yeah, the middle school athletic facilities have been around for a couple of years, and one of my personal conundrums is, gosh, do we need another competition venue? And I'm convinced this is not a competition piece. This is a practice. This is a practice venue. We'll still compete at the high school, and I know this will be a discussion for another day, but I had a hard time getting over that. But once I understood its scope better, I could get there. So we're not duplicating competition venues, because we have a great one at Ames High, and we need to schedule the heck out of it to make good use of it. But yeah, I think whether it's $250,000, something like that, that has some hair on it for board contemplation would be a good idea.
But the budget we approved, Jerry, is only an annual budget, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so the future is just speculation. And the reason we like to approve the budget is because then we don't have to debate sidewalk striping or replacement of 2 tiles in one of the middle schools. I'm concerned about these large projects because there's great potential that we may need that money for something else, or if not need, we may be better served spending the money for something else. So some threshold, I'm not sure what.
On this middle school project, is it possible to get use? I'm not familiar with what all we're using it for, so if that's possible for, that we could get, not right now,
Yeah.
but if you could send us that information to
Sure.
educate us on it, that would be helpful.
Okay, so I surmise that we're going to bring this forward at the next meeting for this specific project, right?
Yes.
And then maybe could you also bring the $510,000, just a brief summary of why it's needed, why the PEPL decided this is a good project. So maybe just take those 2 and highlight those from the next meeting,
Yes.
if that works. Okay. Any other questions for Jerry? All right, thank you. And what I'd like to do, I see Eileen just came in. If you wouldn't mind coming up, and we can just have any questions and highlights that you want to add. Sorry, we were way ahead of schedule, so.
Well, I was actually at Fellows as a Lego League coach, so my replacement was a little slow in getting to me, so my apologies. Thank you for letting me sneak in now. So what questions can I answer for you about our new program, or would you like me to just speak to a few things?
My one question was what student response has been. Are people pretty happy with these tracks, and what are you experiencing?
And we talked about that as a department just about 3 weeks ago. And we would say about 95% of students are self-selecting, or teacher recommendation, counselor, parents at home, selecting the appropriate courses. We have had movement between Path 1 and 2, and probably fewer than 10 students both falls. And the ninth grade teachers have been fabulous in identifying students that would need to move maybe from Path 1 into Path 2 because of capabilities, or those students who would go from 2 to 1. With Path 3, there is an application process, and what we found the second year around is we didn't have nearly as many students apply for that. And then we formed a subcommittee, because everyone loves a committee, right? We have a subcommittee in the department to look at, especially these first few years, students who maybe are appealing if they didn't meet the application procedure. And we've made some, or been as flexible as we could, still trying to maintain just 2 sections of that Path 3 and not overloading those students. So I think response right now has been really good. We feel as a department we are serving well the 3 pathways of students. And I'm really excited about next year, because next year is the biggest change in what has been done for years and years, and I'm hoping that we'll feel like we're leaders in the field in supporting the Iowa Core, because this Path 2 next year, having a semester of chemistry and then a semester of physics is unique at this time. But we really feel strongly that it will allow our students to finish physics and chemistry as seniors if they want to do a more traditional path, or again, we'll give them opportunity to move over into the AP courses, which we just haven't seen a lot of movement after the sophomore year of students into AP. We've seen a lot more movement of students leaving AP and not returning. So we think it'll be a good change and a good fit for what our state standards are saying, following the national standards, and just kind of shaking things up a little bit to give students experience in all 3 areas of science: earth and space science, biology, and then the physical sciences, both physics and chemistry. They have access to that junior year.
And I would like to applaud your department and also administration. I feel this is how we differentiate ourselves from other surrounding school districts, and they always use this model and other, whether it's math, of how we help kids in all different areas of their education. So I love seeing this curriculum adopted.
Well, thank you. We hope so. My heart beats really fast when I think about how much chemistry we'll have to teach next year, but there's 1 year of transition. And we know, too, that we'll continue to educate students and parents, because our program is our secondary, but as students look to post-secondary, especially next year, they really need to be thinking ahead to make sure that they're going to meet the requirements. We offer everything that they would need to go on to different schools, but some schools are more selective than others, and we know those. We've identified those. We long before we ever brought this to you, contacted the Regent universities to make sure our articulation would go through. But we also know we need to keep telling students and parents that these are the things that you need to think about when you're choosing your courses.
Other questions for Eileen? Great, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again for letting me sneak in late.
Our next item tonight's the erosion control. Jerry.
You'll have to kick that over to input 2, Jerry.
2.
It's all on you. I'd like to introduce Eric Thompson with Fox Engineering. He's a civil engineer that did the design work on the Fellows Elementary stormwater portion of the construction project. So Eric's going to be here to give us a little bit of background and information about the new construction, as well as how it changed from the previous, and what type. He'll explain the design, and then he'll be able to answer any questions.
Good evening. So starting off, the pre-reconstruction site, most of the water drained towards 20th Street. A small portion of it drained to McKinley. There was really no on-site detention. Storm sewer ran around the building, picked up some areas, the roof, and drained out to 20th undetained. There's approximately a 3.3 acre area that drained towards the kind of that north property line of the site. It collected water and then discharged it to 20th Street. During the initial phases of the project, we were informed that there was sort of some regional issues with stormwater, some flooding. There was also some local issues with the site with water on that north property line getting into that intake and leaving the site. So the goal was kind of to address those issues and improve the stormwater as much as possible. And also during this time, the city adopted a new stormwater ordinance to greatly reduce the quality and quantity of runoff from sites as they were developed to help improve, the downstream detriments to neighbors and stabilize stream channels. So this is what the site looked like before. And then today, it currently looks like this. Kind of a good landmark as to where water is going is the building. So everything, the building west goes into a pond, which is on the southwest corner of the site. And everything east of the building goes into an underground storage chamber. And this was part of the new standards to provide stormwater detention and help mitigate downstream detriments. The runoff is limited to, so before it was the existing conditions, the idea was that you wouldn't increase runoff from what it was before. And this is a more aggressive approach now where you're kind of going back to pre-settlement conditions. Say it was a prairie, how much runoff was happening then. The goal is to detain that on site and reduce it at a lesser rate. And that's what the purpose of detaining it in the pond, which is a dry pond. There's no standing water, and the underground storage chamber on the east side of the site. And with those, we were able to reduce the amount of runoff and provide water quality for the site. The area to the northeast was reduced to about 1.25 acre, which comes to the two intakes at the north property line, and then is channeled to the underground storage tank, where that can handle events up to the 100-year event, and then events greater than that are channeled through the site to help, minimize any downstream detriments again. Everything to the west of the building goes to the pond, and then out 20th Street, much the same it did before. That's kind of a background on the design of the water, where it's going.
Describe that underground storage chamber.
Okay, so the underground storage chamber collects water from everything east of the building and holds water underground. It infiltrates into the ground to provide water quality and quantity. It has sort of a staged discharge with several different size holes to restrict water flow. And then as it fills up, the rate that it leaves the site increases. It's just a way to provide detention when you don't have the land available, to kind of take it out of sight and put it underground where you can store that stormwater.
So on the north side of the site, between Basin 1 and Basin 2, there's a couple of intakes up there. Do both of those intakes take water to the storage chamber? Do they take it to the west, or do they split the difference?
Both of those intakes actually go east. It's kind of the dividing line where it says Basin 1, Basin 2, that dashed line.
Mm-hmm.
So everything west of there will head down that swale and into the pond. Everything to the east goes into those two intakes and then into the underground storage chamber.
What's the capacity of the storage chamber?
The capacity, I believe it's just under 20,000 cubic feet. I don't have that number in front of me. It's significantly less than the dry pond.
So what happens if a major event occurs and that chamber fills up?
So there's an overflow inside the chamber, and it will discharge into the existing storm sewer that's running along 20th Street, which is a 60-inch sewer.
Is there any possibility of it backing up all the way to the inlet drains?
During that, say you had a catastrophic event greater than the 100-year event, that is possible, and then it would overflow. The design is that it would overflow west through that swale and eventually out to McKinley.
Okay. I question that it would overflow west based on the topographic layout of the properties right there, because I've been out there, I've seen it for myself. And if it were to overflow, it would actually flow north into the property owners' properties, at which point it would not come back to our property. So I guess my thought is if there's a potential that that chamber doesn't hold a lot and it could back up, and if we're getting that much rain, the city system is probably backing up too. It seems like we're doing a disservice to ourselves and our neighbors if we're not allowing that to channel into our larger capacity pond, essentially pushing it further west. Because right now, like I said, it doesn't. The grading there is such that if it overflows, it will go north.
We had it topoed for record. The swale is lower than that property line, and the tree is kind of a high point between the two basins. And just to the north of that tree, water will get around it.
To the north end of the property line of the...
To the west.
I know what you're saying, but having seen it from my own eyes, unless something has changed in the last week, I question that answer is 100% accurate right now. And that's not a fault on you. If your plan was intended to be that way, it could be that it just hasn't been quite met. Because I have been out there, I have seen it for myself, and it does not appear to me that that would be the case, because it is physically higher than all other properties, dividing the west trench from the east trench as it comes off of our property, and that by default forces water to the north if it were to back up and overflow. So it doesn't do what you said it does.
I don't know that that's the case. Again, this would be for events greater than the 100-year event, which typically isn't something you design for just due to the cost, the economics of it. You plan for it. The water will get away from the site and not cause, a detriment. I think during the construction, there was an issue where one of the intakes was too high and not taking any water, which contributed to the amount of flow that one intake was having to take, and it was partially plugged. There was also some sediment in the storm sewer, and it was partially, under capacity because of that. So those issues were taken care of. Sod was put down to help, establish the ground cover, which again will reduce stormwater flow to those intakes. Going forward in the future, I don't see it being an issue.
Jerry, with your discussions with the property owners, what's been their response since we've done some of these changes?
We met out there with the property owners right before they were ready to sod that. They got up to the west side of the one property, and before we got there, we went and reviewed that with them. And we made some final tweaks to be able to take and cut the grade down a little bit lower, a couple more inches anyway, right along the fence line. So right now, what we've done, we aren't able to modify the drainage ditch, the bottom of the ditch, because that needs to drain. But we were able to take at the property line and drop that down so that we could account for some of the silt that had silted up along that fence line that had covered up the bottom of the fence, and we actually dropped it at least 2 inches below the bottom of the fence on there. And so as we did that before the sod people got in there, actually they had brought their grading equipment in there and they did that fine tuning we did about all we could do, I think, and we provided some additional relief or potential relief there right along the property line. So I haven't heard any feedback from them since then.
What's the significance of a 100-year event? We keep hearing that, but what does that mean exactly? That could go for either one of you.
Well, the significance of a 100-year event is in a 1-year period, you have a 1% chance of that happening in any given year. Give you an idea, it's almost 10 inches of rain. So it's a lot of water.
In how long a time? An
In 24
hour or a
hours.
day? Okay.
In a day, yeah.
Okay. And Jerry, do you want to talk about the tree for a second? Because I know we kicked that one around for a long time about removing the tree to help with some of that, or not to remove the tree, and we're very cautious about dealing with trees anyway. But
Yeah, I haven't got the tree response figured out quite yet, I guess. The neighbors didn't seem to have a problem and were suggesting that we consider taking the tree out. That the tree was there, and so it's a nice tree. It's a big, aged, I think it's a maple tree. So it's a nice tree. I didn't want to kill a tree. But that established basically an existing point. And so I think what the design did was to grade it so that the water would flow either direction from there. I think that if we did take the tree out, that it could provide some small benefit, but I don't know that it's enough that's going to be able to have a significant impact on that 100-year or in excess of that 100-year event that might occur. Does that answer your question?
So Eric, what would you recommend? In your professional opinion, would you take the tree?
If you're concerned about it, the tree could help taking it out. I don't know that it's necessary, but if you get an event in excess of the 100-year, it would help channelize that flow to the west.
Well, I think his question is, knowing what you know, if you owned one of those houses there, would you want that tree gone? I mean, you know more about this than at least me. I don't know about the rest of these people up here, but.
I think that during construction, the intakes not being utilized led to the issue. I don't know that the tree, it'd be an extra, I guess it depends how much, it's a very beautiful tree. It's, like Jerry said, it's been there for a long time.
so you think the improvements, though, would make up for having to remove that tree to gain additional benefit? Because if you're going to get more than 10 inches in a 24-hour period, I'm not certain that any one of those basins is going to hold that volume of water to begin with. I'm certain that our city storm sewers aren't going to hold that kind of water either.
Right.
Is there any way to know, if we get 5 inches of rain in a 3-hour window, is there any way to know how well this is performing?
Yeah, it's been modeled and it will handle that.
But will we know, is there any way to gauge on site while that's happening if it's actually functioning properly? It's no different than, I hate using sports analogies, but you practice for game day, and we've got, this is all theoretical on this piece of paper, for me anyway, and is there any way to watch that on some major storm and see if it's actually filling the way that you've hypothesized that it will?
Right, and I think that'd be exactly it. You'd want to see that the water was filling the basin but not overflowing and then leaving. And unfortunately, when we got that 5-inch rain event a few weeks ago and the intakes were plugged and one was not used, we saw that it wasn't.
My concern with this is we keep talking 100-year flood, and that's fine. The measurements that you give are great for average soil figures, but different soils will absorb water at different rates. Some soils, especially ones that are thick and rich in clay, are not going to absorb water at all. which means a 10-inch drain would be more equivalent to a 5-inch drain or whatever it may be. And my fear is that we might have some soil issues going on there too that might be exacerbating the situation. And I'm not an agronomist, I know several. I'm sure that they would back up my statement on that end. I've seen displays of water as it is absorbed or not absorbed into different types of soil. And, you know, it's just amazing at how, you know, you can throw these numbers out, but there's so much more in that dynamic.
Well, there was a soils report conducted for the site. We do know that there's type B soils on site, and we placed 12 inches of topsoil, which has a high infiltration rate. But yeah, I do understand your point for some sites, yeah.
So in the category for what it's worth, I used that term loosely, so took a jog through this site on Saturday afternoon and saw it in its finished state. And I had seen it before in its unfinished state, and it looked to me like everything was sloped to drain. And that probably wasn't the case before. Now that's not certainty that it will work the way it's intended to, but we're wrestling with two things. I think one is gosh, what happened, and were there in construction circumstances that led to that we're not going to experience now, and then secondly is what's the certainty of the fix. And we can knock out trees, we can do a lot of things to increase the certainty of the fix. We've got somebody saying, hey, unless it's really extreme, I'm pretty certain your fix is okay. When I saw the slope from that sidewalk down, I thought, boy, that's pretty steep. But when I look at this plan, all the water off the building, almost all the water everywhere is going west. There's just a very small sliver of land to that north that is going to collect water and let it go north. And that doesn't mean that we're done being concerned about this. It just means, like, from what I saw, it seems like a permanent fix. If the permanent fix doesn't do it, we're obviously having this conversation again, right? Because we want to be the kind of neighbors that we need to be. But Rodney, I don't know if you saw it before the sod or after the sod.
Yeah, so when I saw it was after our last meeting, probably 2 days after the last meeting. They had not sodded the trench area yet. They were sodding the Basin 1 area at that time. And at that time, the area by where the tree is, where the split was still at a higher elevation than the adjacent property owners, which would have funneled everything. And I don't know if it's a design issue or what, but I specifically remember you stating that if, in the case of worst case scenario, it were to back up, it would go west. And that contradicts what I saw for myself. The other thing that I saw, and I don't know if it's been fixed yet or not because I haven't been back out there, was the drain all the way to the east was still sitting about a foot above grade.
Right, and that was the key issue for, not being able to drain water. One of the intakes was way too high. It just didn't get cut down. The manufacturer supplies them that way. They're cut to grade in field, and it just didn't get done for whatever reason. Right. And also all those properties are draining to the south on the school and then into the swale. We did have a record topo done just to make sure that was the case, that water would go to the west, and that just to the north of the tree, basically on the property line, is a low point that allows water to get past the tree today. So it's been cleaned up quite a bit from when you saw it. I agree, it was really rough. It hadn't been fine graded.
Yeah, it had only been about 10 days, so I didn't know if we had more work or not. But, it wasn't the case when I saw it. So if that has changed, great. I will go take another look.
And I guess knowing one of the property owners very well, I think her biggest concern is that we know it's been an issue and we'll be on top of it going forward. So based upon what Eric stated, it also conforms with the city. You know, I think we should move forward from this, but then continue to monitor it based upon various levels of rainfall. That way, if something does happen, we can adjust, as Mike's discussing.
I guess that's, I mean, what is our actual next step? I mean, it'd be final approval of the project? That we're accepting it as is?
We haven't gone to substantial completion yet on that project.
Yeah, we've got substantial, we haven't taken final.
We haven't taken final. Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Any other discussion on this? All right, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
All right, facilities discussion. Jerry and Mike.
And actually, Jerry's there and Mike is, of course, down at the other end. And this came up, of course, with Director Talbot also in relationship to one of our board goals, which said to amend and update the master facilities plan primarily to include the high school and the swimming pool. A couple things I would throw out before we get into a discussion on the high school right at this point was that we're ready to take a little jaunt over to Linmar tomorrow to take a look at their aquatic center. So we're really kind of in that planning phase yet, still trying to solve the major question associated with the swimming pool, which is what can we do and what can we afford to operate, which becomes the critical question for us in the future. As we related to the high school, Jerry had put together at one point a kind of a very draft form, starter discussion form of an outline relative to the high school. Part of our discussion also revolved around the use of PEPAL funds, which we did for much of the elementary project, and building up, of course, our reserve within the PEPAL funds and not going below $2 million in our reserve so that we can be prepared in the future. We talked about the tennis courts at the current high school are in need of repair, which led us to the idea of moving those to this site up here, which is one of our intended purposes, but it also helps free up some property should we decide to either renovate or build new at Ames High School. Our discussion also centered on, at the very last stages, is it necessary that our high school be all one building, or could it be separate buildings, which has a little bit of merit to it. There could be a fine arts wing along with maybe a gymnasium auditorium wing. Those kinds of things all come into play here. The document that you see on your screen and also up above is one that Jerry put together before I turn this over to Mike and Jerry. And I think most people are relatively startled that if you take a look on the left side of that, you'll see a portion of the building that, from my viewpoint, is highlighted in pink, but I think it's really more of a lavender color, Jerry, but the pink still works for me. And it's hard to believe that in the 1950s, when Ames High School was built, that pink shaded area was the original Ames High School. Since then, every multicolored area that you happen to run into was a new addition that was added to it in various years. So it really spans from President Eisenhower almost to the future, or to the present. But this is something that we'll be working with and sharing with a facilities committee made up of community members. As we reviewed the document that had kind of an amended or draft schedule for an outline, it became evident that one of the things that we need to do is first of all make sure that we can get our PEPAL levy renewed. One of the better things that you can do with the PEPAL amendment is put that on your board election form. So when people come up to vote for the board election, they also have that option to vote yes or no for renewal of our PEPAL fund. So that would be, of course, in September of 2017. In the meantime, we had lots of discussion about what kinds of information do we need in order to work with a community group. How long will this whole process take and what should it look like? So we're really kind of in the infancy of that discussion. One of the things that I would share with the board and also with the community at this point is that we have been working very closely with Piper Jaffray. It's our intent to pay off the GO bonds for the elementary projects by the end of July 2020. So we're getting very close. The other thing that I think our board members have to keep in mind is that when you're building a high school, it's not 18 months like we're doing with elementary buildings. This one usually may take as long as 3 years. So from start to finish and getting that and before it can be occupied, it's quite a bit more time because we're dealing with approximately 430,000 square feet. We're also, as Chris would attest, and as we updated our numbers, we've tried to reserve in our 1 cent sales tax money that we still have yet to receive through 2029. We've reserved $20 million to buy down the GO bond on a new high school, whatever that final number may be. And we also have reserved about $10 million as we're trying to push forward with building a new swimming pool. So I think I've talked enough. I think Mike had a very nice discourse with the facilities committee at that time, and Jerry took some pretty copious notes before we shared what that extended timeline was and all of the steps that we need to get to that. We thought it'd be better for us to put that together into a new kind of timeline and then pass it by the facilities committee before we brought it back to the board. But there are lots of steps that we need to follow in order to get that done. And of course, one of the key questions that we have to try and answer before we even get to a referendum is, are we thinking about building a new high school or are we thinking about renovating it? And that one has to come from the public. And I think I've said several times, I think from my seat on the bus and probably the seat on the bus for the entire board is that we have to know that we have support for whichever direction we go before we put it on a ballot. So I'm going to leave it there and let Jerry and Mike chip in, give you an update on what we've been thinking about that.
So I think my role tonight is to just simply explain and summarize some of the discussions we had at facilities to talk about a process from getting us to where we are to where we end. This timeline that's here has months across the top, but it doesn't have years across the top. Okay, so we need to anchor this in time at some point, and that some point is probably pretty directly. But nonetheless, here's an illustration of how the logic works. And I think that's probably the thing for us as a board to say, yeah, that makes good sense, or no, let's do something different. So this is a timeline that Jerry had put together, I think, quite a while ago, with the benefit of some of our discussions. So I'll roll through it. Jerry can point and click to some of the exercises or some of the activities, and we can discuss as things occur to you. So I think from the facilities perspective, we need to study and understand what it will take to renovate, demolish, add, versus completely start over. I think who's ever on the board at the time asking for community support, even if we think we know the answer now, I think having some third party help us walk through that so we've got the documentation for the path we chose and the path we didn't, I think will be useful for the community and useful for the discussion. So our thought process is we need to hire somebody to help us do that study. So that's the first item, select an architect. We're not thinking that this is necessarily the architect that will help us from start to finish. This is somebody that helps us understand what we have and lay out a renovate versus new scenario with some high-level budgeting. Then we get to a community level then where Dwayne Reeves or people like Dwayne can take this out and conduct some community conversations of the merits of both approaches and get some community sentiment around that. And then that ultimately comes back to us as a board, and we as a board say, yep, we've heard, we have what we have, we've heard what we've heard, let's choose this path, whichever of those two paths we choose. I think then at that point, then we're much more well-equipped to go hire the architect that's really going to help us deliver on this work. So we're taking many of the variables out of the mix, and we can hire a firm that, that can help us do that. I think that's really when we start to ramp up staff input, and we work with this new firm to develop a schematic design. So get it laid out with some granularity where we all understand it, where the community and our staff can understand it. Again, I think that with the budget associated with it is what we take to the community and say, here's what we think, tell us what you think, make modifications to that, and then ultimately put a vote before our community to ask for their support. Now, there are 4 times a year when we can ask for that support, and the auditor's office tells us when those 4 are, so we'll have to sync up with whatever that is. I think then, once that hopefully is approved, then there'll be several months to finish the design to the point at which it can be documented for building permits, for bidding purposes, et cetera, and then obviously several months after that for the construction to happen. And the construction could take a little over 2 years, could take a little over 3. A lot of that's going to depend on the complexity of the phasing, either around the site or through the building, something like that. So this process engages the community in a couple of really meaningful ways as we discern how we get from here to there. We get a little professional help to help us figure out what we've got and picking a path. But we're also, I think, hiring this first architect or this first team to help us do the study. I think we can do that pretty swiftly. There are people that we know and that know us, and it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be a pretty small commission, but an important one. I'd say the second architect RFP, where we really go hire a partner to help us deliver that, that's going to be a big deal. There will be a lot of interest in that, and we won't want to rush that process per se, but figuring out what we've got and how it could look, I think, is something that I think as facilities we'd recommend that we can evaluate a couple of candidates that know us and that we know to help us get through this first phase. So pretty good interaction with the board, pretty good interaction with the staff, pretty good interaction with the community, and it's going to take a while. So as soon as we have the capacity to start, and Jerry's finally getting less busy after this last summer. He's not unbusy, just less busy. It maybe gives us some capacity to start.
So what's feedback on that proposal? Anything from the rest of the board? Anything you want to add, Mike or Bill?
Well, I think a lot of people are going to be questioning why we need a high school. And I think the answer is it's not an overwhelming necessity. I mean, we can house people and keep them warm in the building we have. But what we have to do is we have to understand that we're in a very unique situation, an incredibly unique situation. We know we're going to have to replace parts or all of the high school over time. Some things very soon, a few things like the cafeteria way off in the future. But there's a convergence of factors that make this the perfect opportunity for this community to do something right with the high school. We've got 1% money. I predict we will lose some or all of that money within 10 to 12 years. Unless the citizens of the state are willing to accept another sales tax increase, some or all of that money is going to go elsewhere, probably for water quality. So we don't want to lose that money before we get the school done, because that's a lot of money. Next, we have generally increasing property value. We don't know how long that'll last, but as that lasts, that brings in more people to help pay for the bond. brings in more taxes to help pay for the bond, while theoretically even lowering the tax levy. Next, we have very low oil prices. And oil prices are directly related to every input for the high school. Everything that goes in it, drywall, steel, aluminum, wiring, everything in the high school is directly related to oil price. We want to catch this curve before we lose the low oil prices. We have extremely low interest. Now, I know that in terms of a lot of people on this board, I'm ancient. But when I took my first house loan, I was paying 14% interest. 14% interest. The business I was working at was paying 23% operating interest. We need to get this done before those interest rates shift, and they will shift at some point. We just don't know when. We have everyone in the administration trained to be builders. I mean, we really do. If you think about this, this administration is a fine-tuned machine. We've built 5 elementary schools, and the only time we've ever increased the price on the schools was when we intentionally set about to add to the schools. For example, increasing the size at Sawyer, increasing the size of the gyms. Otherwise, we're under budget and ahead of time. We've got a trained administration, and the community is prime for passing a bond because we proved that if the school board pays attention and if funding doesn't have some incredibly unpredictable change, that we can build these schools without increasing the tax levy. So there's a convergence of perfect facts we need to take advantage of, even if we might, ideally, in a different situation, want to wait another 6 or 8 or 10 years to replace the high school. We need to get this done while the opportunity's right.
So I know the 3 of us are on board. We never formally have talked. Is the rest of the board supportive of going this direction? I guess that's the first thing I should ask. Is there a consensus that we want to go in this direction?
Absolutely. I mean, pardon me, a year ago, going through the election process and talking to people, one of the first things that folks would bring up is our high school. And so I absolutely believe that we need to address this and figure out where we're going as a community. I appreciate, Bill, I was taking notes because I appreciated all of those points of information that I think the community needs to be aware of in terms of why the time is, in my mind and in others' minds, a very good time for us to do it.
Yeah, I'd just ask if, Bill, you could just like type that in and just send that to us, because I wasn't taking notes, and so that would be helpful. That was a great synopsis of exactly why it's the right time, not for us as a board, but for the community and for every single person in this town to rally behind this and do this.
Jerry, can you put the timeline back up there for a minute? Bill, you made some really good points, and I agree. Please share. But I do have a couple questions. Well, first of all, I'll say it would be, I think, irresponsible of us as a board not to seriously consider what direction we're going to go. I mean, really seriously, get into the weeds, like Mike likes to say sometimes, to really look at this. But in your timeline, specifically, I know in the past we've talked about a high school committee that Principal Evans was going to be putting together. And is that part of the community input in that for October, November, or is it prior to that? Is that part of it or before that? And would that committee report to the board? I'm making that assumption, but I just want a clarification on that.
There's community input on this particular chart, and I think Jerry's pen is pointing right to it. There were at least 3 months in there of blue that really was designed, and from conversations with Dwayne Reeves, who happened to lead the community input group when we went after the elementary buildings, the question at that time, 6, almost 7 years ago, was do we want 5 elementary buildings or do we want 6?
Right.
And took a few months, but they came back in January and said 5 is the way to go, and the board accepted that and moved forward. In this case, the question is new or renovate.
Right.
And so, yes, that the 3 months that are in there under the blue are indicated as the first community input session that comes along with that. And I think Mike pointed out the really, really important part is that the second architect, or it could be the same one, but the second teammate that we happen to get plays a very vital role for us in the amount of not only community input, but staff input relative to what is necessary for for high school buildings and what we can do better. And there's also some possible site visits in there by the board at that time. They may want to take some trips to take a look at some of the newer buildings that are being built in Johnston and other places to see good things and bad things, and trying to incorporate all those designs in there with the community too.
How I'd respond to that, Louis, is I think there'll probably be a little bit of input beforehand, but mostly I think giving that community committee something to go out and bounce things off of. In the absence of having anything, somebody could say, oh my goodness, the current school's great, why would we want to do anything different? Somebody else without any info could conclude that, oh my goodness, that it's got to come down and we need a new one. If we give this community committee the benefit of some of the work of the professionals, then it's a more impartial conversation about how you feel, and boy, based on what this looks like, I can see a good argument for this approach versus that.
Well, I think that's going to be important, that that committee has that information and they can start that dialogue with the community to answer some of those questions as they come up, because they're going to come up, and we should be prepared to be able to answer those questions as quickly as possible.
So yeah, I'm on board with moving forward with this. I don't know if the timing is going to be something that we get the support of the community on now or not, but I think the exercise alone is worth the adventure going forward to find out some of these questions. I think it will benefit, if not us, future boards that will follow us, and we would be doing them a service if we move forward with this and start asking some of those hard questions and finding out where the community sits with some of these issues.
So seeing that we have consensus for that, my recommendation with the facilities was to have them vet the stage 1 architect, since it'd be probably a local firm that's going to do some very preliminary work, not have a formal RFP process for that. Last time we went through a formal process and all the board was engaged in that. So for this first stage 1, I was going to have facilities vet that, of course, bring it back to the board for approval with a recommendation. But then once we get to stage 2, that larger firm would be a full board engagement. People okay with that concept? Okay.
And I appreciated Director Talbot's comments too. I wish my high school football coach could have, I was ready to break the door down and go out and win a game or something. It was, and the timing aspect of that is the part that is very critical that Director Talbot brought up, and that is in relationship to the 1-cent sales tax, which is due to expire in 2029. There's been discussions about extending it to 2050. There's been discussions about peeling parts of that away, as was indicated by Director Talbot, for water control and taking it away from schools. So that's something that will be certainly a very hot issue. But with all the other factors that are there, much like the elementary buildings that we saw 6 years ago, the window of opportunity is still open. And if we can pick the right time and jump through it, it will serve our kids very well in the future.
So any other discussion on this topic before we move on?
I just had a general question on timing. I know you said there's not years on it. Are the months then arbitrarily, or are you anticipating that, yes, our facilities is going to start looking at selecting an architect in March? I'm imagining that's a question.
I would think it'll be sooner than that.
Okay.
I asked Jerry, I'm like, hey, did you get that thing updated? He's like, the timing was somewhat uncertain, so the months are just arbitrary on top. It was anchored in this March, but I would say probably in November and December we can get this party started.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Moving on, board committee work. Updates from what was provided?
You know, I thought we all had, the work session that we had was interesting on board goals, and one of the things that we talked about was, it's listed in the one document that we'll see here in a while, was the build on prior work of expanding the leadership infrastructure, partially through professional development and the use of the PLCs. The Teaching and Learning Committee is going to go through most, if not all, of the elementaries. We have 4 of the elementary schools scheduled where we will be going in and viewing PLCs in just a couple of weeks. And we did this process just with 2 schools 3 years ago, which was interesting. I think if we're, to go along with that goal, I think seeing all 5 of our elementary schools and how those PLCs are functioning is going to be very important. And so I'm looking forward to that activity. It'll take a full Monday to see all 5 of them, but we'll get it done.
All right, nothing else? Move on to certified enrollment. Dr. Taylor.
I'm going to ask for some help from Jerry again. If you'd switch that over to input number 1 and remove that agenda form. And then I taped that down at one time, and I had it just sitting there just perfect. So you guys screwed it up for me. Oh, there you go. Now if you can move it over, it might help our audience too to see. This is one of the key times of the year where our certified enrollment finally comes up, and historically it's always been somewhat of a crapshoot. People probably can remember that 3 years ago our certified open enrollment went down by nearly 50 students. I remember times when it was dropping by as many as 80. This is the official certified enrollment form which I certified and was sent into the Iowa Department of Education. The caveat that I would have for the board and for the audience at this point is none of these numbers are exactly final yet, because there are still, as I tried to describe to the board last time, there's still arguments about who owns which kids, and they will be settled within the next couple weeks. Just to walk you through this particular document, because it seems somewhat complicated, that first line that says resident public students attending your district number 1, it gives you a column that says what the current is, what the previous was from last year, and what the change is, so that you can see our resident student enrollment increased by 21.1. And please keep in mind, this is a weighted enrollment. It's not noses. It is actually determined by such things as homeschool students count 0.2. Some special needs kids count as high as 3.6 because of the amount of needs that they have and the amount of staffing that we require. Those that come in sometimes come in for, as you will find out, post-secondary classes, and will take only 2 or 3 classes from us, and so those count proportionately up to a 0.6. So while we have noses in a building, sometimes they count as little as 0.2 and as much as 3.6. And if that didn't confuse you, let me try to go just another step further. Resident public students attending another Iowa public school district, which is lines 2 and 3, for those of you who are keeping tally, this represents the number of students that we have that are open enrolled out of the Ames schools. And you can see that our previous number was 198. It's down to 196, or a decrease of 12.3. Non-public shared time and CPI students dual enrolled for district classes, which falls under lines item 4 and 5, are really dual enrolled students that are homeschooled, but enroll for as many as 1, 2, or 3 classes that are offered within our district. Most, but all not all of them are high school students taking mostly upper level science and math classes, for example. But you can see from our weighted enrollment that increased slightly by 2.14. The next line is non-public shared time and CPI students dual enrolled for, that's called post-secondary enrollment option classes, meaning, that's another item 4 and 5. Again, it's homeschool students who are enrolled in our system but take mainly college level classes either at Iowa State University or with DMAC. This post-secondary enrollment option program does allow juniors and seniors to take classes on a college campus, or they can even take them online for both high school and college credit. And you can see that there is a decrease of 1/4 of a student on this particular line. Line 5 identifies residential facility students, and I know that we do have a residential facility here that is Beloit. As you found out from our PEPL budget, we do rent classrooms at the Beloit campus, and those students, because they are at Beloit, for the most part over history, it's always been 0 since that facility is and has been identified as one of our schools for the Department of Education. The most important line happens to be the next one Jerry is getting down to, which is line 7. And you can see that our current certified weighted enrollment is 4,191.9, which is an increase of 10.69 over last year. So we did see a very slight increase in our actual weighted enrollment for this particular year. The bottom half of this particular certified enrollment chart starts to get a little bit more interesting, and I think you would find out that the next line, 8 and 9, says non-resident public students attending your district. Those are students who are open enrolled in to the Ames Community School District. And you can see we had an increase of some 28.5 students. We're now open enrolling 404.2 students. One of the things that I tried to increase, or not increase, but at least let the board know relative to the open enrollment is that this really does continue an upward trend that we've seen in the last actually 6 years. Just to give you a little bit of an example from that, in 2011, our certified enrollment showed 196 Ames kids open enrolling out, and 226 neighboring students were open enrolling in. So that trend now has changed from just about the same number of students in and out to nearly twice as many students are open enrolling into the district. Why, you may ask, and I want to believe that it's because of our program offerings, and maybe to borrow a little line from the past, maybe it's build it and they will come. But I'm pretty certain that many of the open enrollment kids that we have now, which are coming in because of the program offerings that we have, and that's something I think our board and our community can be very proud of. The other thing that falls into this is many people will ask, well, why are they not counted in our actual enrollment? If you go back up to lines 2 and 3, those students that are in Ames that are open enrolling out. When a student open enrolls out of the Ames Community School District, they are still Ames kids, so we count them. The money follows that student if they would open enroll to Ballard, for instance. Likewise, the line that's down at the bottom that Jerry is pointing out, the non-resident students that are open enrolling in, they're not resident students in Ames, but the money follows them into the district. And so if you can do some math on that, you can see that that's a pretty significant amount that we're adding to our general fund because of that. As we go to the next line, this is pre-K4 students. This is our voluntary preschool program. Right now it is showing that we have an increase of 1 student. The last 2 lines, as you happen to get down to them, line E, I think we're getting down to total age students provided in instructional programs by the district. This takes the open enrollment kids, the difference of some 217 students that we have open enrolling in as opposed to out, adds them up, and you can see that the number of school-age students that we're giving instruction to is up 51.49 over last year to 4,409.6 students. The last line, which is actually line 13, is a total additional weighting that's given our English as second language learners. Again, this goes to a weighted formula, and that's up by about 3.52. I mentioned to the board that I think the increase in weighted enrollment is always a good thing. There's also a few good trends in the data. For instance, the number of students that are open enrolling in continues to grow larger than the number of students enrolling out. And the number of resident students in line 1 is still showing some growth for the district, as is the total number of school-age students that we provide instruction to. As it becomes more available, I will share some greater disaggregation of this data, which would include where students leaving Ames are open enrolling into, and which students are coming from which districts to open enroll into the Ames Community School District, and any other breakdown that I can provide. I think this is fairly good news. At least we're not down. We are increasing a very slight amount, and I may even go out on a limb and predict that I think that actual enrollment for next year will be much larger than 10. And I'm basing that just solely on, we have one of our 2 smaller senior classes that is graduating, and we're currently bringing in anywhere in the number of 330 to 340 new kindergarten students every year, so hopefully that number may see a much larger increase next year. I'm ready to try and answer any questions on this one. Again, the only caveat I have is that there may be a tweak up or down of 1 or 2 students, I think, on that actual enrollment as our final arguments are taking place.
So really, the upshot of this from a budget perspective is that we'll be able to count 51 or so more students than last year as it relates to what the state provides us for the allocation per student in the establishment of our budget.
It's a great summary in the big picture. That works out pretty well.
Now, a lot of school districts are probably noting a 51 student increase, I would guess. Some are blown past it, like the Waukees and Ankenes, but
yeah, there's a couple, 2 or 3 that are almost 10 times that. But I think I'm very comfortable with this. I still go back to what I said a second ago, and I think that the programming that we've been able to preserve within our budget offers maybe, I guess in my opinion, it does offer the best education possible for kids in Iowa.
And I know in the past you've provided surrounding districts comparisons, and I think that's useful. I don't see us competing with them per se, but just more like comparing notes of what migratory patterns are happening and how we can not just serve kids in our boundaries, but kids all around us.
Any other comments, questions? All right. We are policies to announce. Anything from Ronnie or Tim? Highlights?
He asked for highlights. I don't know if I can answer that. This was first policy committee meeting of the year, and really just kind of touching on some of the simpler things and all pretty minor adjustments, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I can run through them all, but the basic gist of it is that we, as always, we looked at the wording, maybe changed a word here or there to give a more defined meaning of our intent. In some cases, we may have taken out paragraphs because we felt they were redundant. About the biggest add to that I can think of is the one reference board committees, and that really just addressed a common practice that we were already doing, but put it into policy so that it would be something that we would adhere to in the future as well.
All right, so comments will be accepted to the superintendent's office through November 2nd. Any other comments from the board at this point? We'll see this again. All right, great. Moving on consent, I'll take a motion.
I move we approve the consent items as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, second by Rosser. Discussion, Dr. Taylor?
We have the minutes of the regular board meeting from October 3 and 10, 2016, claims and payrolls from Ms. Chris from 2016, and the financial reports also from September of 2016. You'll find a personnel report and the welcoming of Barbara Malkow as a second grade teacher at Mitchell Elementary School due to increased class enrollment. And we have a significant list of gifts to the district that include cash of $222 from Des Moines Oktoberfest to the high school book room, pickup load of MDF from JC Woodworking to the high school woodworking classes, Frank Lloyd Wright print from Tim and Leslie Weibel to Fellows Elementary School, $600 from the Golden K Kiwanis to Northwood, $1,656.35 from the Edwards PTO to the Edwards Media Center, $100 from Misty Metzke to the Edwards Makerspace, $100 from the Central Iowa Board of Realtors to the Edwards Makerspace, another $100 from Hunziker and Associates to the Edwards Makerspace, and cash in the amount of $175.38 from Deerdorf for School Board to the district. There are also, I believe, on this particular agenda is one other consent item that relates to the contract agreement for Momentous to publish the yearbook at Edwards School, continuous open enrollment, and receive and file the homeschool assistance program report from Shelley Larson.
Any other discussion? All right, proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Item 19.
I move the board approve the list of 5 major goals created by the board during strategic planning work session, that they be effective for the 2016-2017 school year.
Second. Moved by Esposito, second by Rasmussen. Discussion.
Before the board jumps in on this, I wanted to say I took a little bit of liberty relative to some of the language here, but it's open for board discussion and board edification, so to speak. We know that for the most part, the mission asks why, the vision asks what, and when we get to goals, we ask how, and we know all of this is making a difference, or how do we know all of this is making a difference. The other addition I would add to this is that it's up to the administrative team at this point to take a look at board goals once they are approved, and then come back to try and answer that particular question about how will we know this is making a difference, which would include indicators and a method for the board to monitor the progress of the administrative team to assist the board in reaching their particular goals. With that, we're ready to take notes if there's any edification on the language.
I thought it was a good session that we had, a good summary. And like I told Dr. Taylor today, that I think all these goals line up for where we're going. The one thing I did add that he touched on was the need to review those. Anytime you set goals, it's meaningless unless you review them periodically. So what I'd like to propose doing is having maybe a quarterly update, and you're not always going to have things accomplished because of whatever's going on, but it'd be nice for our board to have a systematic approach of knowing, okay, how are we making progress in this area, and what do we need to change stuff up. So right now, within those 5 areas, we have what success looks for, our budget, communication, teaching and learning, and facilities. So really the budget's already being handled by our budget committee, teaching and learning's right on there, and then our facilities is managing that as well. So really the only 2 that I'd like to maybe assign is, and I haven't talked to TLC yet, but the whole success area, I'd kind of like to have them focus on that and just kind of figure out for us whether it's the dashboard we've been talking about or just how do we define success. And that's kind of part of what you guys' goals are anyway, I think, through TLC. And then Dr. Taylor said, with Kathy's help, they're still working on the communication piece, and we'll update us accordingly. So I'm good with what Dr. Taylor said in this proposed board goals outside the date change. But any other comments? Do we want to change the wording? Are we okay with the wording? Thoughts?
Yeah, I probably focus less on the wording and more this text box on page 3, work of the board and work of the superintendent, so to speak. So, and it all gets to the points, Luke, that both you and Dr. Taylor are making. Okay, so we have these goals, now what? How do we breathe life into them, and how do we manage them, kind of like we're managing a facilities plan or a PEPL budget, or any one of a number of things that we need to manage and put enough process around so we know what that looks like, but not so much that it squashes the intent of it. So I focused less on the wording of the goals, because I thought they were reflective of our discussion, and I'm not much of a wordsmith, but kind of how we hold ourselves to account and keep these in front of us, I think, is the challenge. Whether you want to assign that to some folks, or you want to take that, or we have a session around that, I'd say is probably a next step to come out of this. And maybe it's our first quarterly update.
Other comments?
I guess my only question is, and I'm not particularly into the words, but the Ames experience, having a question as a goal, the only thing I would maybe consider would be, rather than what indicators, maybe define indicators that drive a successful student experience, and define, I don't know, I'm trying to work through whether or not a question should be a goal.
Fair enough. Do you want to change that?
So let it be
Well,
written.
I'm curious to hear if there's any other responses to
I
if anyone's working on the question as a goal.
That hit me too, so I'd be supportive of changing it.
Okay.
So let it be written. So
Yeah,
let it be
I
done.
think a goal is a stated outcome or desired
Yeah.
outcome. A question isn't necessarily defining that.
Okay, so we'll propose changing what to define?
Define the indicators that drive a successful student experience and how it should be systematically reviewed.
Great. I'm comfortable with that.
All right, any other discussion? All right. Move to approve as amended. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. And the last item 20.
I move the board approve the request to the School Budget Review Committee for modified allowable growth for LEP allowable costs in the amount of $302,511.96.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, second by Rosser. Discussion.
We've done this before, Chris. We're arguing for the capacity to have some room to spend some more, right? Oh, she's not looking at me in the eyes, so I probably didn't say that. No, I probably didn't say that right.
This is the second year of this particular program. Last year was the first time that the state made this available. So yes, we've done it, but only once before.
Okay.
All right, proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board. None? All right. Items from the staff.
As a reminder, we're still working to confirm at this point the joint meeting with United School District on the 21st of November, which would again start at 5 o'clock with a little social time before the original meeting, and then we can break into our meeting. There will be a closed session on November 7 for the board immediately following our regular board meeting to actually review and discuss the sale of our 3 properties, including Old Edwards, Crawford, and the existing older facilities building. We, as you recall, asked interested parties to fill out a property interest form. We'll have an opportunity for the board to, in closed session, discuss and vet those particular things on the 7th of November. We also need to keep in mind that we'll be coming back, I think, to the board with policy KG very soon, which deals with the rental fees or rental of school facilities. We also need to bring forward the athletic budget for this board's approval too. We do have an I-Lead meeting, which is with the minority students in education with Iowa State, that's scheduled for the 9th of November. All board members are invited to attend. I know that committee is headed by Director Rosser, and we're looking forward to meeting with them and talk about resume building and resumes in general with that group on that particular night. As we close this one down, I wanted to also remind the board that, and I think I've tried to notify all board members that tomorrow we're helping the Ames Chamber of Commerce out, and I'm really pleased actually that they would call and ask if they could use our boardroom. They had a meeting scheduled with the Ames Economic Development Commission Board, and in the last second, the site got pulled from them. Amy Howard called from the Ames Chamber, and again, I want to say I was very pleased that they would consider us now that we're in these facilities, but we'll be hosting that particular meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock in this particular building. We also know that at this point, we're still looking forward to having a legislative forum, and that date is still set for the 15th of November. Again, that will be here in this particular boardroom, starting at 6 with an informal social time, and then an opportunity to ask questions of the legislators and legislative candidates from about 6:30 to 7:45. I have Angie Strotman's name down. The board is encouraged, if you'd like to, we're trying to make room for at least 4 parents and 4 community or business leaders who are passionate about school funding. So if you have someone you'd like to add to the list with Angie, that would be terrific. We'll make sure we get invitations to them. The last item from the staff is a sad note that Carl Hare, our Director of Technology, lost his mother last Thursday morning. The funeral is tomorrow. Many of our administrative team went up this evening for the visitation to represent the district. And Carl probably will be out for a few more days yet as he's trying to deal with that one. So,
Anything else from the board? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Esposito, second by Franson. Discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 7-0. We're adjourned.